So it's going to log the changes into that. Okay, so we've got our trigger now set up. So in order to test this, we need to insert some sample data into the table. So I'm just going to run a quick query on the table so that we can see that the table is actually empty. And this, you can see here, the table is empty. There's no rows at the moment. So I'm going to insert a couple of rows into the table. Okay, so this is a query. This is my insert statement. I'm going to insert 2 rows here. The first one will be for a chap called John Doe. Second one will be for a lady called Jane Blue Lime. So let's highlight that, and that should insert 2 rows into the table. Okay, we've got some errors here. So the reason why I had an error was because I left out one of the columns here. Notice I've got 3 columns in that field. So now I've now added an ID, and you can see I've already inserted this record. So if I run this now, you would see it has 1 record. You can see I've inserted John Doe. So what I need to do now is do the same for here. I'll just come here and type in the ID column and put a comma there and a space, and here I will just insert the number 2 to include. I'm just manually assigning IDs to the rows here. So let me execute this, and that will give me record number 2. So you can see now that's been inserted. So if I run the table again, I should have 2 records. All right, so this is just, I'm just doing basic insert here just to illustrate how the trigger works. Ideally, in a normal way, this ID column should assign automatically when you insert, but I've done it manually. Okay, now we have 2 records. So let's assume this lady here called Jane got married and has come back to us to say she's married. So now we need to update her details to her married name. Okay, so I now have an update statement. So remember, her current name is Jane Blue Lime. So I'm saying I'm updating the employees table. I'm setting the last name to equals to Brown, where the ID is equals to 2. You can see the ID here is equals to 2. So it's going to change this lady's name, Jane, change the last name from Blue Lime to Brown. So let me run this statement and execute that. Hopefully everything should, okay, I got an error. I want to know why. The reason why we're experiencing some issues, you know, when we created the table and when we inserted the values, we manually set a value for the column ID. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete both tables and set the table up again, this time using an automatic ID insertion. So I'm going to delete the 2 tables we created, the employees audit and employees as well. What that means is that inside the employees, I've got a trigger. That means I'm going to have to recreate this trigger here. Okay, so I'm going to right click and go delete or drop table, and that will get rid of that table. And I'll do the same for the employees audit, and I'll drop that table. Okay, so I've got both tables dropped. That means I'll need to recreate the trigger. The function, trigger function, is okay. I've already created it. Sorry about this. That means this lecture is going to go on a bit longer, but hopefully that should solve the problem. So let's recreate the table. This is the first table, employees table. What has changed here is this serial here. This is what will give it an automatic numbering. So I'm going to highlight that and execute. Hopefully that should create okay. So that's created that table. I'll do the same. I'll do the same for this table here. I right click, select all and click on that. So we've now created both tables. So now the tables have been created. If I refresh my table list, both tables should be there now. I've got the employee audit and employees. Now I can reinsert the sample data. Okay, so I'm inserting some sample data here. So I'm just going to highlight both and execute. And that should create, you can see it's created the rows. You can see here, I've not used the ID because of the automatic numbering we set up when I recreated the tables. So this table now should now have 2 rows. So what I need to do now is go back to the table and recreate the trigger. So I right click on the employees table, expand that, and there should be an option for trigger. So I will just expand, right click, I'll create the trigger, wait for it to populate. I'll give the trigger a name. So I've given the trigger a name, same name as before. I'll click on the definition. So it's going to be a row trigger. I say yes. I'll leave all this. That should be okay. Everything should be set. Click on event. The event I want is going to be an update. This is when I want the trigger to fire. When there's an update, I'll just go to the definition. I need to select a trigger function. Click on the drop down. This is the trigger function we created earlier. So we've got the event. So it will trigger after. I'll put after an update, not before. So that's it. I'll click save. And so we've got our trigger now set up. All right, so I'm going to quickly do a quick query on the table and just make sure we've got something in there. You can see we've inserted 2 rows because of the automatic numbering. You can see it's automatically inserted the number row. So now Jane, let's assume Jane has got married. So we're going to update her last name. Hopefully that should trigger a set of the trigger. So I've added this query here. So we assume that Jane got married and her last name is now Brown. So we're going to update this. So where the ID is 2, which is this, and that should fire off the trigger. So I'll select that and click on that. You can see the query has returned successfully. So that means recreating the table has helped because of the automatic numbering. So now the trigger should have worked because we've done an update statement. Remember, triggers are automatically fired. So what I expect the trigger to have logged that information into the audit, employee underscore audit. So let's do a quick query on the employees underscore audit. Employee, let's take out the S. So it'll be audits. Let's do a quick check on that. Yep. Run that table. We should have something in there if everything's worked okay. Excellent. So you can see here is logged the ID, the employee, the last name. This was the old last name, and it tells you when it was changed. You can see the trigger has worked and it fired off the code automatically. So that is really good. Really pleased about that. So the issue we had earlier was because of the automatic numbering. So we have successfully created our trigger now and also tested the trigger. Thank you so much for watching. Apologies, it's taking quite long. If you do have any issues, please let me know. Take care and bye for now. Hello and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, I'll be showing you how to manage your PostgreSQL triggers. So this will include things like modifying a trigger, disabling, and also removing a trigger. So let's start by taking a look at how we can modify a trigger. To modify a trigger, you have to use the following syntax, and it begins with the alter trigger statement. So you use the alter trigger statement to modify a trigger. This statement is a PostgreSQL extension of the standard SQL language. So basically the syntax begins with the alter trigger statement, where you specify the name of the trigger associated with a particular table that you want to change. Second, you put the new trigger name in the rename clause. You can see there's a rename clause, so you put the name you want to change the trigger to. So I've got a simple query here. So for example, if we wanted to change the last name changes trigger, okay, we have a trigger called last name changes. If we wanted to change the name of that trigger, which is associated to this employees table and also to the log last name changes. So if we wanted to change that, we have to use this alter trigger statement. All right, so if we wanted to change it, this is the syntax we will use to change the name of that trigger. So this statement basically is saying change the name of this trigger, which is a trigger set on this employees table, change it to this name, log underscore last name changes. So let's take a look at how to disable a trigger. PostgreSQL does not provide any specific statement such as disable trigger for disabling an existing trigger. However, you can still disable a trigger by using the alter table statement. So let's take a look at the syntax. So this is the syntax. If you want to disable a trigger, so you basically specify the name of the trigger after the disable trigger clause to disable a particular trigger. To disable all triggers associated with a table, you use the all. Okay, so if I wanted to remove all the triggers linked to a particular table, I will use this all switch as well. Instead of a particular, rather than use a trigger name, I will use this all switch, and that will get rid of all the triggers linked to a particular table. The key thing you need to know here is that the disabled trigger is still available in the database, even though you're just disabling it, you're not removing it. So it's still present, but it will not get activated when a trigger event occurs. So this is again another sample query here to disable a trigger. Say for example, I want to disable a trigger. I'll use the alter table, which is the table that contains the trigger. In this case is the employees table. And I'll use the disable trigger clause and then type in the name of the trigger I want to disable. So this will disable a specific trigger. If I wanted to disable all triggers for a table, I'll just use the all switch rather than the specific name of the trigger. Let's see how we can remove a trigger. To remove an existing trigger definition, you have to use the drop trigger statement. So let's take a look at the statement. So this is a typical statement you would use to drop an existing trigger. So you specify the name of the trigger that you want to remove after the drop trigger clause, and then the table that the trigger is associated with. To avoid errors of removing non-existent trigger, it's best to use the if exist option, which is this if exist, and that way you avoid the error message coming up in case you're trying to remove a trigger that does not exist. So by using this if exist option, it checks first to see if there is such a trigger then it goes ahead to remove it. So this is an example on line 8 here of how you would remove a trigger. Say for example, if I wanted to remove a trigger called log_last_name_changes on this table called employees, this is the statement I would use to remove the trigger. So that's it. In this lecture, I've shown you how to modify, to disable and remove an existing trigger. Thank you for watching and bye for now. Hello there. PostgreSQL manages database access permissions by using the concept of roles. A role can be thought of as either a database user or a group of database users, depending on how the role is set up. Roles can own database objects, for example, tables and functions, and can also assign privileges on other objects to other roles in order to control who has access to which objects. It is possible to grant membership in a role to another role, this way allowing the member role to use privileges assigned to another role. A role that has login right is also referred to as a user, while a role that is a member of other roles are referred to as groups. Database roles management involves the database roles, the role attributes, the role membership, also involves inheritance, so group and user inheritance, dropping of the roles. Dropping basically means removing the roles, and default roles. So we are going to be taking a look at the different aspects of database role management listed here in separate videos. Thanks for watching and bye for now. Hello there. Database roles are global across a database cluster. A database cluster is basically a group of databases. Database roles are conceptually completely separate from operating system users. So the role that a user will have for an operating system is completely different to that of the database. To create a role using an SQL syntax, you specify that by using the statement create role followed by the name of the role. You can also use the pgadmin tool to create a role. I have logged into my pgadmin 4 tool, so you can use this tool, administrative tool, to also create a role using the login group role dialog box. So you see this here, login group roles. You can use that to define a role just by right clicking and going create a role. You specify that and it gives you the dialog box. So from this dialog box you can specify the name for the role, give it a comment, you can add definitions, you can add privileges, you can add membership, parameters, security, and finally the SQL that is used to define the role. So this is an area you can use within the pg4admin tool to create a new role. Every connection to the database server is made using the name of some particular role, and this role determines the initial access privileges for commands issued in that connection. The role name to use for a particular database connection is indicated by the client that is initiating the connection request. To get all the available roles in a cluster, you can query the PG role system catalog. So if I expand this here, you can see here we've got all these PGs here. So we can query the PG_roles catalog in order to determine all the available roles currently set within the cluster. So let's quickly run a quick query to see the current roles we have. So to do that, I'm just going to click on my databases here and select that, and then I go to Tools, click on Query Tools, and that will give me the query window here. So this is where I will write the query. I have added the query here. So it's basically a 4-line coding. I've just spread it out to make it more understandable. So you do a simple select statement. You select the role name from PG_roles. So this PG_role here is a system catalog. So if I click on this icon here and execute, it tells you successfully run. So it tells you these are the various role names currently available within the database cluster. So that is it for this video. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the role attributes. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello there. A database role can have a number of attributes that define its privileges and interacts with the client authentication system. Only roles that have the login attribute can be used as the initial role name for a database connection. So a role with the login attribute can be considered the same as a database user. You can create a role with login privileges in a couple of ways. So the first one would be using a statement with the create role followed by the name, and then you specify the login attribute. Another way you can create a role with login privileges is by creating a user. So by default, the create user is equivalent to the create role. The only difference is that the create user assumes the login by default, while the create role does not assume the login by default. You have to specify the login. A database super user bypasses all permission checks except the right to login. The super user is a dangerous privilege and should not be used carelessly. So you have to be careful how you use the super user privileges because it is extremely powerful. It is best to do most of your work as a role that is not a super user. To create a new database super user, you use the create role name followed by the super user word. You must do this as a role that is already a super user. So for you to create a new super user, you already have to be a super user. The database creation role must be explicitly given to the create databases. So to have the ability to create a database, you must explicitly have the create database permission. The only exception to this is the super users. Super users bypasses all the permission checks, so only super users can do that. But apart from super user, anyone who wants to create a database must have the role explicitly given. So to create such a role, you use the create role followed by the create DB statement. So that is the statement you need to create or to apply permissions or privileges to someone to be able to create a new database. A role must be explicitly given permission to create more roles. The only exception is the super users, since those with super users bypass all permission checks. So to create a role, you need to use the create role followed by the name and then the word create role. A role with create role privilege can alter and drop other roles. Also, it can grant or revoke membership in them. However, in order to create, to alter, to drop or change membership of a super user role, super user status is required. The create role is not sufficient to be applied to super user privilege. A role must explicitly be given permission to initiate streaming replication. Exception for this is the super users. So anyone with a super user can bypass all permission checks. A role that is used for streaming replication must also have the login permission as well. So to create a role that's got replication permission, which will include login, this is how you would define that. So the statement will include create role followed by the name and then the replication with the login. A password is only significant if the client authentication method requires the user to supply a password when connecting to the database. Okay, so to create a password or specify a password upon the role creation, you specify this way. So you use the create role followed by the name of the role, and then you specify password, which is usually a string. String basically means text. I just want to give you a tip here for good practice on creating a role. So basically, it is good practice to create a role that has the create DB and create role privileges, but not a super user privileges. Okay, and then you use the role for routine management of databases and roles. This approach avoids the dangers of operating as a super user for tasks that do not really require super user privilege. You can also use the login group roles from the PG4 admin tool for roles attributes. So if I right click on this now, I go roles, you can easily modify attributes. For example, where it's got privileges, you can specify if the role, person with the role can log in, can have super user access, can they create roles, can they create databases, can they update catalog, inherit. So you can use this login dialog box to do that. This dialog box here, you can use that just by choosing the appropriate options, so either yes or no. So just wanted to show you that you can also do it via the pgadmin4 tool. A role's attribute can always be modified after creation by using the alter role statement. So that's it for this video. We explored some of the role attributes in this video. Thanks for watching and bye for now. Hello there. It is easier to manage roles as a group so that you can grant or revoke privileges from a group as a whole. In PostgreSQL, you can create a role that represents a group and then you grant membership in the group to individual user roles. By convention, a group role does not have login privilege. So to create a group role, you use the create role statement as follows. So type in create role followed by the name of the group role. For example, we can create a sales group role like this. You just type in a statement create role followed by the name of the group. In this example, I've called it sales. Once the group role has been created, you can add a user role to a group role by using the grant statement. For example, I can add the user bond to the role sales group. So this is how I would do it. I'll say grant sales to the user called bond. You can also revoke the role privileges by just typing in revoke sales from a specific user. Notice that PostgreSQL does not allow you to have circular membership loops in which a role is the member of another role and vice versa. Hello there. A user role can use privileges of the group role in the following ways. The first is that a user role can use the set role statement to temporarily become the group role, which means the user role uses privileges of the group role rather than the original privileges. In addition, any database objects created in the session are owned by the group role instead of the user role. The second option is that a user role that has the inherit attribute will automatically have the privileges of the group roles of which it is a member, including all privileges inherited by the group roles. Let's take a look at an example script. So this is an example script. So with the following script, if you connect to the PostgreSQL database, for example, as the user bond, you will have privileges of bond plus the privileges granted to the sales, because bond user role has the inherit attribute. However, you do not have privileges of marketing because the no inherit attribute is defined for the sales user role. However, you can execute the following script by typing in set role equals sales, and what that does is that it will provide privileges granted to the sales but not the ones granted to bond. However, if you execute this script to set the role to marketing, what that will do it will provide privileges that is granted to marketing, not the ones that are granted to the admin and bond. To restore the original privilege, you can use the following statement by typing in reset role, and that will restore the original privilege. Note that only privileges on the database object are inheritable. The login, the super user, the create role, and create DB are special roles that cannot be inherited as an ordinary privilege. So that's it for this video on group and user role inheritance. Thanks for watching and bye for now. Hello there. Before you can remove or drop any roles, there are things that you need to check before the removal can take place. And this is because roles can own database objects, and that in turn can hold privileges to access other objects. So before you can drop a role, you need to first of all check to see if any objects that is owned by the role has been reassigned to other owners, and also any permissions granted to the role must be revoked. So before removing a role, you must reassign or remove all the objects it owns and revoke its privileges. If you remove a group role, PostgreSQL will revoke all membership in a group automatically. The user roles of the group are not affected. So in order to remove roles, you need to use the drop role statement to remove a group role or a user role. So that is it for this video on removing roles. Thanks for watching and bye for now. Hello there. PostgreSQL provides a set of default roles which provides access to certain information. Administrators can grant these roles to users and or other roles in their environment, providing those users with access to the specified capabilities and information. I have got my PG for admin tool, so I'm just going to expand this login/group roles so that you can take a look at the default roles. So these are all the default roles that PostgreSQL provides. So I'm going to try and run through some of them so we can take a look and see what they do. All right, so we've got one here called PG_monitor. That basically is used to read and execute various monitoring views and functions. All right, and then we've got this one, PG_read all_settings. This basically is used to read all configuration variables, even those normally visible only to the super user. We've got this one called PG_read_all stats. That basically is used to view various statistical data relating to the database. And then we've got this one, PG_signal backend. This basically is used to send signals to other backends, e.g. cancel query or terminate a query. Okay, and then we've got the PG_scan_table. This basically is used to execute monitoring functions that may take access, share, locks on table. For example, when there are locks on the table, you can use that to monitor it and also monitor potential issues relating to the table. The PG underscore monitor, PG underscore read underscore all settings, PG underscore read underscore stats, and PG underscore scan underscore table are basically intended to allow administrators to easily configure a role for the purpose of monitoring the database server. Okay, so they grant a set of common privileges that allow the role to read various useful configuration settings, statistics, and other system information normally restricted to super users. So care should be taken when granting these roles to ensure they are only used where needed to perform the desired monitoring. Administrators can grant access to these roles to users by using the grant command. So that is it for this video on the default roles. Thank you for watching, and bye for now. Hello there. In this video, we are going to create a role by using the PG admin for GUI. GUI stands for Graphical User Interface. A role may be an individual user with or without login privileges, or a group of users. When you define roles at the cluster level, all the databases in that cluster will share the role. A cluster basically is a group of databases. I have logged into my PG4 admin. So to create a new role, you just right click and click on create, and then click on role, and you give the role a name. So I can call my DB. I'll give it an underscore monitor, because I want this role to monitor the database. So you can give a comment if you want. I just say monitor database. Okay, and then you go through the different tabs before you can actually save what you've done. So let's move on to the definition. This is a general tab now. So go to the definition. Definition here, basically you set a password. So just set a password, and then you can set, if you want the account to expire, you need to activate that. But if you don't want to, you can leave that blank, grayed out. So also connection, basically the limit of the connection, I'll put it to -1. And then privileges, click on privileges. So these are the privileges. So I don't want the role to have login rights, so I leave that set to no. I don't want it to have super user privileges, so I leave that as no. I don't want it to create other roles. I don't want it to create databases. I don't want it to update the catalog. I do want it to inherit rights from the parent roles. I don't want it to initiate creating replication and backups. So let's move on to the next tab, which is membership. I want it to be a membership of this PG admin here. So it says here, select the checkbox for roles to include with admin option. I want it to include admin option, so I click on that. There's parameters here. If you need to set any parameters, this is where you would set it. I'll move on to the security tab. And again, this is where you set any parameters. And if I click on SQL here, it will show me the SQL that was generated from the options I have entered. So this is the SQL so far that I've generated following the options. So it's creating a role called DB_monitor with these following privileges: no login, no super user, no create DB role, no create role, but can inherit, no replication, connection limit -1, that's the password, no expiry, and it's going to be granted the PG monitor membership so the PG monitor membership is being granted to the role called DB_monitor with admin option. And this is a comment on the role. DB_monitor is monitor database. So that has been the role created. So once you're happy with the input from the SQL, so this is the SQL that was generated from all these options you've entered. Once you're happy with that, just click on save and that will create the role. So now if I click on this to expand it, you should see the new role that I've created called DB Monitor. If ever you want to see the SQL that was used to generate a role, all you need to do is right click and then click on create script. It will generate the SQL that was used. So you can see here, it shows you the SQL that I used to generate that role. So that is it on creating a role. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hello there. Backing up databases is one of the most critical tasks that a database administrator has to perform. Database backup is simply the process of copying the database data and information to a safe location to be used when required. So you may have a situation where there may be a data loss or a system failure, and you may want to restore the database back with as much information as possible. If you already have a backup in place, you can restore that information from the backup. PostgreSQL provides several tools that you can use to perform backups. So the first one is called PG_dump. This is used if you want to perform a backup from the command line or the terminal, and the PG_dump tool basically is used to back up a single database. You also have another tool called PG_dump all. Now this tool is used to back up the entire databases. So if you've got a cluster of databases, a cluster is a collection of databases, you can use the PG_dump all to back up all the databases you have in your cluster or system. The final tool is the PG admin tool, which is a graphical user tool. You can also use this to back up your database. In separate videos, I'll be showing you how to use the PG_dump tool to back up a single database. I will also be showing you how to use the PG admin tool to back up a single database. So I'll be showing you these in separate videos. So that's it for this introduction to database backup using PostgreSQL. Thanks for watching and bye for now. Hello there. In this video, we are going to back up a single database. We are going to do that using the PG_dump tool. Now, before we back up database, it's good to have a directory that you back up the database to. And then we are going to be using the terminal. So if you're on a Windows, we'll be using the command prompt. If you're on a Mac, you can use the terminal, and then we'll be using the PG_dump tool to perform the backup. So the first thing to do is to make sure you have a backup directory. I'm going to create one now in my C drive. I'm just going to right click and just go new folder. I'll just give it a name. I'll call it PG backup. PG standing for Postgres backup. So that's my backup directory. The next thing I need to do is open up my command line. So I've got my command prompt here on Windows. I'm just going to right click on it and go run as administrator because I want it to run as an administrator, and that will give me this screen here. What I like to do, I like to navigate to the root of the C. So to do that, I'll type in cd ... and press enter, and that takes me back. I'll do a cd dot again and press enter, and that takes me back. So I'm now in the root of the C. So I'm just going to type in CLS to clear the screen. So all I have is just root. The next thing I want to do is to navigate to the bin directory of my Postgres installation. To navigate to your Postgres installation, it's usually in the program files directory. So I'm going to click on my programs file and look for my Postgres installation. So that's my PostgreSQL folder. Click on that, click on 10, and then click on bin, and then just copy the path, which is this one here. Right click, copy, and then you go back into your command line, type in cd to change directory, a space, and then paste that location into it. Press enter. So we now have access to the Postgres installation and the bin directory. I'm going to type in CLS to clear the screen. So now that we have that, it's time to use the pg_dump command. So before I execute the command, I want to explain the command to you briefly. So this is a command I am going to execute to do the backup. So let me run through some of the switches in the command. This is the tool pg_dump. The -u basically specifies the user that is going to be used to connect to the PostgreSQL database server. In this example, I have used Postgres to connect, to make the connection to the server. The -w, this forces the pg_dump to prompt for the password before connecting to the PostgreSQL database server. So that's what the W is for. It will prompt you for a password to connect to the server before it will allow the backup to proceed. The -f specifies the output file format, the format of the output file, and the format can be anything. It could be a custom format. I'm going to be using a tar, or you can also have it in SQL, which is a plain text format. So this is the command, and we are backing up to this directory. Remember, I created a directory called pg backup, so it's going to back up to this directory, and this is going to be the name of the file. It's going to be called DVT rental. DVT rental is the database I'm backing up, and I'm going to back up using a tar format. Tar is a archived format. So this T here basically is used to represent the format of the backup, which I've represented it as a .tar. So I'm going to copy this into my command line and then execute the command. I've now copied the command here into my command line. If I press enter, I should get a prompt for a password. So I need to enter the password to make sure I have authority to do the backup, and then I press enter, and if everything goes okay, it will return back to the bin command. So that means I've got no errors, so it would have performed the backup. So now if I go back and take a look at my directory, we should see a file there, a file here called DVD rental. So you notice in a zip format, it is an archive format, which is a .tar format. Okay, so we've successfully performed the backup using the pg_dump tool. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hello there. In this video, we are going to be backing up a single database using pgadmin tool. I have logged into my pgadmin utility. So under the pgadmin in the tree area here, you expand the databases by clicking on the plus sign, and the database I am going to perform a backup on is this one here called DVD rental. So you right click and there should be an option for backup. Click on backup and that will give you this dialog box. Here there is some information here. You can click on that and that will give you some information about the console. If you click on this here, it will open up a new plain text here where you can read up about using this dialog box. So feel free to do that. So I'm just going to click to X out of that. So this is what you get. You have to start by specifying the file name. You always need to have a backup directory. In the previous video, I already created a backup directory. So I'm going to navigate to the backup directory. So this is the backup directory I created called PG Backup. So I'm going to click to select that. Okay, you click, and here I'm going to give the file a name. So this is a directory it's going to dump the backup into. So I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it DVD Rental 2 because I've already got a backup there called DVD Rental. So I'll make this DVD Rental 2, and the format is going to be a .tar. Once I've done that, I'll click this select button, and that will put that in there. So I now have a location to backup to. So the format, you have custom here. You can click on the drop down and select tar. These are the different types of format you can backup to. I've chosen tar, so I'm going to leave that selected. If you want compression, you can select compression. I'm going to skip all that. Encoding, if you want to do that. Number of jobs, you can specify the role name. I'm going to click on the drop down. I am going to select Postgres as the role that I'm going to use to backup. And then if you look here, we've got dump options. PG Admin Backup Tool provides various dump options. So if you click on that, you can see the different options. If you want to know what they all do, just click on this question mark here. It will give you a description, so just read through and you can see what the different options do. For simplicity, I am going to accept the default that has been specified here. So anything in green here is default. I'm just going to scroll through. Anything in green I'm going to leave as default, but if you want to know what all the options are, click on this question mark and read through them. So I'm going to accept the default, and once I've done that, I'm going to click backup, and you can see here it says backup created, and you could click here to see the details of the backup. So if I bring that up a bit, you can see here it tells me backing up an object on the server, tells you what it has done, tells you the time it started, and you can see the various files. These are all the files it has backed up and dumped into the location I have specified. So this is my backup directory. You can see this is the file I've just backed up called DVD Rental 2. This was from a previous backup. So we can see that the backup has been successfully performed using the PG Admin tool. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now. Hello there. In this video, I'm going to briefly introduce you to a variety of ways that can be used to restore a PostgreSQL database from backup. You can use the PSQL tool to restore plain SQL script generated by pg_dump and pg_dump tools. You can also use the pg_restore to restore tar file and directory format created by the pgdump tool. You can also use the pgadmin tool to restore a database from backup. If you are restoring to a database with the same name, it is advisable to terminate all the connections to that database before you prepare the backup file for restore. However, if you are not restoring to the same database, if you are creating a new database, then you don't need to terminate all connections. So I would recommend, if possible, create a new database and then restore into that database. I am going to be showing you 2 ways using separate videos. I'm going to be showing you how to restore a database